Paper sizes are part of a quietly practical history that affects how documents are made and handled. This program traces how a simple idea about proportions became a widely adopted system for sheets of paper. We start by noting that paper has been cut and folded in many different ways over centuries, often without a single guiding rule. Different towns and workshops used their own standards, and that variety persisted into the industrial age. Manufacturing and printing created pressure to reduce waste and to make resizing simpler. A consistent system answered those needs with predictable relationships between sizes. The approach that became common in Europe focused on a single proportional relationship. That relationship allowed a sheet to be halved and still keep the same shape. Over time, that idea was written into formal rules and national standards. Those rules later formed the basis for the international standard many offices use today. Before standardization, paper sizes varied by region and by purpose. Handmade sheets arrived in sizes that suited local presses, bindings, and folders. Printers often cut large handmade sheets down to fit specific jobs, producing irregular leftovers. That practice made it difficult to plan layouts or to scale designs consistently. Architects, engineers, and publishers each developed their own customary formats. Paper mills responded to demand with larger or smaller runs in popular sizes, further reinforcing local customs. The Industrial Revolution increased the need for uniformity as machines required predictable inputs. By the late 19th century, many designers and engineers began to look for a system that could simplify cutting and folding. Simple regularity promised savings in time and material. The next sections detail how that regularity took shape. A useful idea was to choose a shape that stays the same when cut or folded in half. That concept had been observed by writers and craftsmen over decades, and it appealed to practical people who worked with paper daily. The mathematical solution is an aspect ratio that, when a sheet is halved across its longer side, produces two smaller sheets with the same proportions as the original. That feature makes scaling straightforward and reduces awkward trimming. It also helps when photocopying or printing at different scales because the layout shifts predictably. Over time, that proportional idea became the core principle for the formats that blurred the lines between printing, office work, and manufacturing. The remainder of this program follows how a formal system grew from that simple principle. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, industrial designers and paper manufacturers discussed formal systems. Printing presses and reprographic equipment benefited from predictable sizes, and large organizations began to prefer consistent formats. Several proposals emerged in different countries for standard families of sizes. These proposals varied in detail, but they shared the aim of simpler scaling and less waste. Attention turned to a single family of sizes that could be generated by halving an initial sheet. That approach reduced the need for many unrelated custom sizes and simplified storage and handling. Eventually, one particular formulation gained traction among technical communities and standards bodies. The next section covers the German standard that formalized the idea. In 1922, a German standard known as DIN 4776 established a family of paper sizes based on a single proportion. The standard presented a series of formats labeled in a simple sequence so that each size halves into the next. The largest format of the main A series was defined so that its area equaled 1 square meter. From that starting point, the rest of the series followed by halving. That choice tied the sizes to a convenient physical measure and gave each label a clear relationship to the others. The DIN standard proved useful for industry because manufacturers, printers, and designers could plan around consistent dimensions. Other countries noticed the practical benefits and began to adopt compatible approaches. Over the following decades, the system was refined and discussed within international standards organizations. The proportional rule at the heart of the system uses the square root of 2 as its guiding ratio. That ratio is less important to describe precisely than to understand what it accomplishes. When a sheet of that exact shape is divided across its longer side, both resulting sheets retain the same proportions as the original. That quality makes enlargement and reduction simple for many mechanical processes. Photocopying machines and printing presses can reproduce content at common fractional scales without reformatting. The uniform relationship between sizes reduces wastage when cutting sheets for particular tasks and simplifies storage and transport. Manufacturers can produce paper rolls and cut them with predictable outcomes. For anyone handling paper frequently, the result is an unobtrusive convenience that keeps workflows steady and straightforward. The standard includes several related series of sizes, each with its own purpose. The A series serves everyday printing and stationery needs, with A4 emerging as the common office sheet in many countries. The B series provides sizes that fall between the A sizes, useful when measurements need finer increments or larger formats. The C series is intended for envelopes and is sized to fit A series sheets with room for folding or protective margins. These families work together so that envelopes and inserts match predictably. Labels and forms benefit from that alignment, as do industrial packaging processes. The three series form a practical set that addresses a range of routine tasks without introducing unnecessary complexity. Users seldom need to think about the math behind these sizes during normal work. After national standards proved their value, an international standard was prepared to harmonize practices across borders. The international document consolidated the established families and made their definitions widely available. Many countries adopted the standard for government documents, education, and commerce, which simplified exchange and reproduction of printed material. The standard also made it easier for manufacturers of printers, paper, and office machines to design equipment for global markets. Adoption was gradual, and some regions retained traditional formats for historical or commercial reasons. Even so, the core family of sizes became broadly familiar in most parts of the world over time. The system's quiet utility continued to guide routine decisions about paper dimensions. In practical terms, the standard reduced confusion for businesses and simplified supply chains. Ordering paper became easier when labels corresponded to predictable dimensions. Printers could design templates that scaled without repeated adjustments, saving time on layout work. Architects and engineers found drawing and folding more manageable when sheets reduced cleanly by halves. Filing systems and envelopes benefited from the predictable pairings between sizes. For educational and administrative agencies, a consistent size meant less waste and clearer expectations. These advantages did not produce dramatic headlines, but they did produce steady improvements in efficiency across many routine tasks. The system quietly supported a wide range of everyday activities. Not every country adopted the international family, and those differences persist for various reasons. North America continued to use different sizes that evolved from earlier conventions and commercial habits. Printers and manufacturers there developed equipment and templates around those local dimensions, reinforcing the divergence. Even where the international family is common, specialized industries sometimes prefer alternative formats for historic or technical reasons. Paper weight, grain direction, and finishing practices can also influence which sizes are most convenient for a particular task. For most routine office and domestic purposes, however, the international family provides a reliable set of options. The coexistence of systems is a reminder that practical choices often reflect long-standing habits as much as technical merits. Designers and educators use the system as a teaching example in typography and layout because of its predictability. The same basic proportions simplify exercises in scaling and composition, and they provide a common reference for students and professionals. Manufacturers benefit from predictable raw materials and fewer special orders. Archivists and librarians appreciate formats that store and reproduce documents cleanly. Even small conveniences, like envelopes that match their contents, add up to less friction in routine work. The system's influence is practical rather than declarative, showing itself through steady, everyday ease rather than dramatic change. It remains a background element in many processes that people rarely notice deliberately. Understanding the family of sizes and the reason behind the proportions can help when converting measurements or preparing documents for printing. Simple rules let one move between sizes without guessing. When a sheet is halved, the new size keeps the same shape and a predictable area, which makes planning for folding, cutting, and storage straightforward. Digital tools have made conversions easier, but the underlying geometric relationship still matters for hardware and physical production. When designing anything meant for both print and digital distribution, awareness of these standard sizes reduces surprises in production. The system's modest elegance is most useful when applied patiently and consistently over many routine tasks. The history of standardized paper sizes is a story of quiet efficiency rather than dramatic invention. A proportion that keeps its shape when halved, national standards that formalize that proportion, and later international agreement all contributed to a practical system. The result is a set of families that fit together logically and serve a wide range of ordinary tasks. Many people use these sizes without thinking of the rules behind them, and that unremarkable familiarity is part of the point. Standards work best when they remove decisions from daily life and make processes smoother. Thanks for joining us for History of Paper Sizes IS-216. If you are still awake, please stand by for our next program.